So I think so. Basic introduction. Sunil Satyendra here. I am a coach. I have been in the coaching world for less than 2.5 years. I take to coaching like an out of syllabus page in a mystery novel. I don't know where to place myself. That's how it came to be. I am an accidental coach, but I think over a period of time, I realized I'm a good coach, and that's about enough to be here in this particular place. I got into coaching in my early 30s. I quit my corporate career of 8 years. And in corporate, I had been a part of a global organization from Germany. And then I was with so if you press the brake has to hold. And that was what I was doing as part of the software structure. Then essentially, I was famous for everything else apart from software. That included working in terms of volunteering, scholarship scholarship for students that really needed it, and also on sustainability, climate change, and multiple other aspects. Coaching became an accidental aspect. I got into it again, love at first sight. But this is my second love. My first love happens to be creative writing, and that is poetry and short stories. I've penned approximately around 7,000 plus poems in the last 14 years. And for a very long time, I did a streak of around 8 years with a poem every day. And then life happened and things got into different aspects. But when I got into coaching, specifically at a PCC level, they said there's something called as metaphors. And I think, oh, that was it for me to say, I think this is where I am, and this is my place of being. And I come from a space where I'm very happily niche agnostic. I work with individuals across all spectrums, all age groups. And essentially, I work with you. And that's what you see in the background here as my tagline of Nimma Coach, which in my language, in Kannada, means that it is translating to your coach. I'm your coach for all things coaching. So I coach, I mentor coach, and the two other things that is pending in my list there is a coach supervision and say coach train the trainer, which I think are on route in my head already. And that's a little bit of what I do. I am part of Bangalore, and that's where my birthplace and all the other things are. So definitely. So go ahead, guys. You can also do it a little later and jump on it. Right. So that's the introduction from my end in terms of what is this all about, what I am all about. I love to talk to people. I think that was the first challenge to not talk to them, but to listen to them. And it was a very interesting aspect. So listening became a very fascinating piece. But I loved that space early on in my PCC journey of how I can bring coaching and poetry together. And now when a client is stuck, if the other coaches find it difficult, I think I'm very, very happy that a client is stuck and they are in an I don't know loop, because I can always bring the magic of asking them permission to do something different, and then bring on some of these concepts of coaching meets creativity. And so tomorrow at the same time, same link, you can catch up on how that happens with possibly, if somebody allows it, a demo of how it happens as well. So that's about a little bit about what I do. I run a community for coaches of coaches. It's called the Tribe of Coaches. We are 224 coaches right now. We are a 21-month-old baby. So we've been working with multiple people across, and it started off as a community that was initially around peer coaching, but then more of that happened, and there are sessions every Monday wherein we're doing lives, we're doing live mentoring, networking, and much things. So that's how I am so effortlessly doing 21 sessions across the ICW. So some of those concepts have been tried and tested in the tribe, and so they find their place here. So if that looks interesting, drop me a text. I just putting my WhatsApp here on the chat, and then you can catch up. So that's the logistics as the bare minimum things that are done. So I want to start off this conversation with sharing my screen, and Also, on a very interesting aspect of uh, yeah, I think I'll hold the horse for you, give you a little bit of suspense, and share this beautiful part. So you should be able to see two images or a series of images spread across two places. I will show it to you in a minute. Yeah. So you should be able to see it in another minute. Share it now. Yes. So I hope it's visible. Just give me a thumbs up or somebody can switch on your camera and sorry, we switch on your audio and just let me know you can able to see this.
We
Yes.
can. I can see it, Sunil.
Fantastic. Thanks, Gayatri. Thanks for that. So that's picture number one, and yeah, it's a series of pictures. Then there's picture number two here, slide number two, which offers you some more images. And there's picture number three. Going back to the first one, and again, it's a series of images. Yeah. So just keep a look of what these pictures are and maybe take a minute or two to either switch on your phone or take a notepad, a pen and paper, and look at what's your favorite picture and describe that picture in about 5 to 6 sentences. So each of these elements can be a picture that you are looking at.
So, Sunil, just a clarification.
Yes, Aniket.
Are we to pick one from each
So
slide
one,
or how
not one from
one?
each slide. Overall, you can pick one. And once you've picked it, describe it for yourself as to how you're describing it. So I'll repeat again. You can choose any of the pictures that are coming here, whatever is something that works for you, resonates with you, and sit with it for a minute and describe it for your own self. Take a pen and paper and describe it.
Sunil, I'm sorry, I'm just listening to everybody and I'm not able to do, but I'm really tired today.
No
I've been
worries.
running here and there. I
No
know,
worries.
but I've been trying to, attend your event also and this and doing my work also. So today has been a real tough day.
No worries.
I don't want to miss anything. The FOMO syndrome.
Your charge over? Hmm.
So if any one of you needs the pictures back on with you, I've shared it on the chat as a PDF. You can download that if you need it. Maybe another minute or so, and then we can get back to our space of taking this session forward. Yeah. Okay. Anyone would like to share? Maybe two of you would like to come in and share anything that you feel is ready. Um, you can continue to express yourself on that, in your sheet of paper or on the chat if that works for you. And maybe while you're writing this, just put a tab on how many of the words that you have used count as metaphors. Love this particular space. So this is called the silence of coaches. So it's when 25 coaches sit silently. And I think it's got a special place in the world for coaches being silent. And Gayatri says there's one metaphor. Gayatri, I think it's a little deeper. You'll have to look at it. Right now, that's how I'm feeling. Okay. So, possibly if I had to look at sharing what was my experience of looking at these pictures. So, the one that really resonated with me was the aspect of looking at the image that had um, the circle thingy or something around like too many strings that were there. So, a lot of chaos. So that's something that resonated with me today because today has been a chaotic day. It's not been the easiest. I'm sleeping at late in the night, essentially waking up very early. After three alarm snoozes, finally, all the shut eye making itself to wide open spaces and getting onto the metro and finally going to a school where I was taking a session today. And I had the most unruly set of kids today who I think were hell bent on not being participative in the session today, which put me off. And I think I blew my trumpet. I was not my most favorite guy at that point of time. And essentially, I ended up having a space where I knew my ears were red with irritation. And now came back home, wanted to sleep, but when you have such a large network of people, somebody found it interesting to give me a call just when I was at almost the verge of sleeping. I just knocked on the door of sleep and somebody called. And time flew, and here we are in this metaphor conversation. And that's the craziest part of it. And slowly things are unraveling from chaos to calm. And that's why I loved that silence that we all had. Um, Uncontracted silence. So I'll pause at this point, and whatever I now said was filled with strategic metaphors. I don't know how many of you have caught on to that. So even when
Sunil, what is the difference between just a metaphor and a strategic metaphor?
so I wanted to sort of put your attention to some of those. I knew Aniket was nodding along, so he was sharing without having to share, without sharing it there, and I knew which one hit home. So, and I also, being a writer myself, I knew which one to put where to stress, so that that hits home, and it also comes so seamlessly and effortlessly that I don't know if I'm telling you a story or the story is real or not. So that was what was there, and strategically placed with metaphors, with the intention of this conversation being full of metaphors. Now, if you look at it, whatever I said in terms of how I felt, my ears were red. Again, ears being red is another metaphor. Then I felt like unruly kids is another metaphor. Waking up, loss of shut eye, knocking on sleep, sleep knocking on me, all of them are metaphors again. And so the point I'm trying to make strategically is that we are walking, talking metaphors machines. So again, walking, talking metaphor machines is also a metaphor, because at the end of the day, what we are sort of sharing is essentially a solid or consolidated version of something that's big in our head. Basically gets a little bit of pinpoint accuracy or a pinpoint saving in our brain, possibly with something that is metaphorical. It felt like the day was a chaos. Is again, even though it grammatically is a right sentence, I don't understand what it is unless somebody actually asks me, saying, "Hey, what happened?" Right? So chaos for me could mean something, and chaos for you could mean completely something else. And that's the aspect of how as coaches there are things that the client is sharing that looks very interesting for us, or possibly even interesting for the client, and the client may not realize that there is something more that is being said, and something more that is being unsaid at that point of time. And with this particular language usage of the metaphor, it is also telling us what is the dictionary of things that is happening in the client's mind. And again, very, very clearly putting some of these metaphors out there, dictionary of thoughts, very clearly, so that it becomes a thing that you start looking at conversations per se as metaphors. So, specifically to say whatever you were writing had to be around one or two metaphors. Maybe it may have a little bit more, is the overall point I'm trying to drive. I am trying to drive is again metaphor. Trying possibly is a verb, but then depending on I think I'm trying is a sentence that if the client is using. Trying what, trying where, etc., etc. So just pausing there at that point of time, for a millisecond more with the client, and checking in with the client allows them to access a story, an inner story. It felt like a Herculean task today. It felt like I was on the island of Rhodes, and I was Rhodes himself. I'm a poet, so I can spit metaphors right, left, center. Again, right, left, center is another metaphor. So just introducing and reintroducing it to you that people, when they share, are sharing a lot with metaphors, and languages are rich with that. And it's the easiest form of self-expression, where a lot more is said with little being said. Yeah. So, with some of you already being coaches, some of you on coach learners aspect, maybe the next obvious question would be saying, how do we discern what is the right metaphor to choose to pass for the client or pass with the client? Am I being too fast with that, or do you need a little bit of fast to just have the point hit home? Or is this the most logical next question?
No, this is good. I think we're moving in the right pace.
Fantastic. Thanks, Aniket. Deirdre, you've put your hand up. Yeah.
Um, I was when I was being trained, it was how to choose the best metaphor is leave it up to the client, that the client will choose the metaphor. So I'm interested in your take on that,
Now,
that
nice.
we don't choose the metaphor.
Fantastic. Now, if I am, or if I'd shared about my day, about all that I shared, what metaphor would you pass at? What would you ask me?
Wow. Um, I forgive me because I actually, when you said the thing about the school kids, I thought you actually were a teacher. So I wasn't sure. So that might be, if we were a new client coach, I might ask you around that. I have maybe a little bit more information. I'd say, you know, so sleep was knocking on your door. I don't know.
Absolutely no
I
worries.
love
No worries.
using metaphors. I think there's any one of them. I almost feel like any one of the threads will lead to something. So if I didn't see, I'd be also listening for my client. I've had clients who've said, well, when I'm in the flow and when I'm writing, I feel like it's, like it's like a river, and it's a very powerful metaphor. I mean, and it's almost universal, I would think. Um, and then I'd say, where are you in the river, right? So I think knowing the client a little bit better somewhat might help. But on the other hand, I think from a naive standpoint, I'd say, so you're a school teacher? I thought maybe you were, oh, no, that's the way the people were acting at work. Unruly. Wow. Maybe that would be something. I don't know. I'm not sure. That's why I'm here. Thanks.
Sunil,
Fantastic.
can I just add? So,
Please, Gayatri, please.
I like metaphors, right from school muhavras and all, especially the Hindi ones. We don't get to use them much. But I often ask this question, you're not getting sleep. If you're an animal, which animal would you most resonate with? And often it makes them, okay, I feel like a sheep being led and not having my independence. So if they're not coming up with anything to get them to think a little bit more, you can just say, okay, how do you go about it?
I think that's a beautiful space. So I think in terms of answering some of the questions that Deirdre put, and you also sharing. So if I am a verbose client, that's where the catch is. Neha, I've seen your hands raised. I'll just come back to you in a minute. So the verbose client is a little bit of a conundrum. It becomes a catch-22 because I am somebody who shares with a lot of metaphors. And Deirdre said, I'll pick on one of those metaphors and it leads me somewhere. Uh, but again, coming from that aspect, is it coming from coach's need or is the client's need? And also one very interesting aspect, right? So some of us are peer coaches. Some of us are aware that metaphors are a window into the client's worldview. The client may not be aware that a metaphor is something that they have shared, and that's a window into their worldview. So for us to be at a space to be present enough to not just look at the word that was shared, in terms of the English or any language expression where language comes into play and language also has metaphor, imagery, alliteration, blah, 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 the list of things that happen as part of the grammar aspects of it, is also to look at the client's body language and tonality and all the other things that come with the expression of the words that also extend as metaphors. So, and maybe also with the tuning of the aspect, the interesting aspect, I don't know who shared this in one of the recordings. It's about additional to the facts, what are the feelings that are represented through them? Is there a pattern to some of these metaphors that even just from a language point of view, you're able to connect with? And possibly the easiest question, if you are getting a bombardment of metaphors, is to say how you're feeling after sharing all of this. The easiest question there is to ask the client to choose their metaphors. I think that's the right answer, but maybe the way the client can choose can mean multiple things. But again, whatever is the meaning that the client has, I don't know by that. And you said I could be talk about unruly kids and maybe talk about my office or something else altogether, right? Okay. So, Deirdre, is it okay if I just check in with Neha and come back to you? Yeah. Neha, or
Hi, thank you so much.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, the question that you just asked was that if you have a client who has so many metaphors that are coming in, and just now, how would you go ahead and handle that? That was the question, I think,
Mm-hmm.
just a little while ago.
Correct.
And in the last few moments, you did mention about the body language tonality, and how is it that you're feeling as a question that can support. So that was something which was really interesting, and I really like that. The reason why I had placed in my hand was up that uh, I, so I do a lot of work with terms of the neuroscientific researchers, and um, in the research world of the neurosciences, some of the latest things that are coming in are that when people go ahead and complete their sentences, right at the end of that description, the last metaphor that comes in out is perhaps the one. And then if just question that, okay, you talked about the last, like, taking the last metaphor and then connecting it, how is it connected to the outcome that you would like to achieve in this session of hers? And then they say no, no, or yes, yes. You picked it, that is what was the thing. In my experience, I have felt that, and neuroscience research actually tells that earlier when the person or the client is going ahead and sharing, it comes in from one part of the brain, and then slowly and steadily, if you give enough time for them to say, it comes in from the more from the various other aspects of the brain, because it's just like that tree which has those grapes. So the grapes which are at the lower end will come in first, and only then will the grapes from the higher, you can pick up from, not the tree, I mean to say the vine, and then you can pick up from that further area. So that's what
Right.
is my experience. Just thought of share.
Okay, I love that aspect where you mentioned the tree and then you had to come back and say that's not a tree and that's a vine. So I am smiling because of that. But very interesting point. I may not have had a look at it from saying, is that the last one that um, was the most significant one? But that's a seed for thought for me as such. Thank you for sharing that. Thanks, Neha. Thanks for sharing. That could be an interesting aspect. Maybe you could also look at, all of us could look at it from that lens in terms of how, in terms of our own usage, is it the final kind of metaphor that comes along? But my point I am still sitting at with is, there could be a lot of other things that could have also held a lot more of weightage for the client, except maybe the last one. But I also can look at it from saying it's an engine that's getting heated up, right? So the first gear, the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth. And when they're pausing, they're coming back to possibly the lower one, and not necessarily the highest one that they're passing with. Um, so it could be a de-escalation of some of those thoughts and stories and other neural firing at the place. Just a wild thought. I don't know if that makes any, um, not necessarily sense, but it may fit into certain thoughts and may not fit into that. Right. So interesting that you shared this. And now I think, and there you had something to share.
Um, I just, I sometimes I think it's almost, you know, deciding, what kind of question. I almost want to say, like, again, putting in the client, who are you in this chaos? Depending on where we are, have we decided on what we're working on, in the context of the coaching session? Um, or who are you in this unruly, this unruly classroom? Like, who are you? Like, are you the teacher? Are you the principal? Are you the kid? Are you the quiet kid? Who are you in this? But sometimes I think it's just really, in a certain sense, using the metaphor as almost priming the pump, if you will, that it almost doesn't matter, because once you get them speaking in that language, um, I see that the client starts to be more comfortable in that, especially when they're maybe more, I don't know my neuroscience, but maybe more left-brained, analytical, and I got to do this, and then and like you said, when you're observing them and their hands go, I feel like I'm just, throwing buckets and buckets and buckets, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of buckets. Who are you in this fire? Right. And then they start, wow. And then this whole other thing, they start speaking as if they're not in their left brain, if I'm getting that right. They're in their right. And they're like, oh, and then wow, that really opens up a lot. So I don't know if that's
Absolutely true.
helpful, but
Absolutely true.
anyway.
Beautiful. I think the way you were animated at this particular point, that's also a sign for you to read from the client. That the level of animation, the level of sharing, that looks interesting. And I don't know if any metaphor that I choose leads me to that point, because while sharing, there could be other things that are coming at play, and choosing on a metaphor that may have some other story at the end of it, at the end of that rainbow, could take the conversation on an entirely different tangent, not alongside the contract that we originally intended. So at that point, we'll have to be noting on to the aspect of the pre-contracting can happen. I think that's always available, but it may not be a thing where the client wants to go there. It's coming from my point of view to say, you know what, I think I found a fantastic metaphor. Let's get this going. So our discernment at that point, maybe not the right word discernment, but our presence there at that point of time with the metaphors that are flowing in that river has to be practiced, and you will sometimes know, okay, I think we'll have to let go of that, and that's where also the facts and the feelings come into play. What's the story, and what's happening with the story? And essentially, because the magic is there with metaphors, these words and these set of words and phrases have a deeper connection to the who of the individual. And there could be different versions of the who that get switched on based on what metaphor we switch with. And I think that's where the skill set would be in terms of where which metaphor are we sitting with? Are we sharing based on whatever the metaphors we are looking at? And also, when you were thinking of to write about those images that we had shared on the chat, or sorry, on the screen, were you thinking in terms of something as a memory that was jogging in? Were you thinking of, were you only feeling? Were you thinking? Were you feeling? Were you navigating memories? Because every image is triggering something. And sometimes even a question can trigger an image, can trigger a feeling, can trigger, like audio, visual, and kinesthetic responses based on the client. And it could be an interesting aspect to just pause with the client at that point of time. And, you become that bend in that river where you're sitting and watching the client move with the river as and when they go. So that's also another aspect of metaphors that we have to look at. And maybe another very interesting thing, the lesser seen aspect of metaphors. Niket, I'll come back to you in a minute. The lesser seen aspect of it, possibly for reflection, is how many times have we as coaches used ourselves as the instrument of enabling metaphors for the client? I remember a client of mine who was, in a session early on in my PCC journey, and she said, a lot of things, and she's like, I don't know what's happening. And I said, XYZ, I heard you share all of this. Well, you're sharing something very strongly came up with me, and can I share that? And you feel free to, take it however you want it. You can absolutely ignore it, laugh about it, etc., etc. And I said, it feels like you're an old bus that starts at 4:30 in the morning and, comes back to the depot at 12:30 in the night and uh, just continues to pick on people, drop them at their destination and does not have time to rest. There's always a star, red sign, a green sign, and a yellow sign waiting for you. And I think that laughter that came out after that was the most interesting and the most authentic and precious laughter there was. And after the session, after that point in that space, the session was an entirely different session altogether. Because with some skill from my end, with something beyond the coaching aspects, had articulated something that was not something that the client had even thought of articulating it that way. And when she heard that, something else in her aspects actually got switched on, and she was like, I think that's the most easiest way that I could describe myself in maybe all the last 20 years I've been that bus. And the rest of the conversation was only at the bus. Like bus and the wheels go round, round, round. So a wheel and the bus go round and round. So that was how the entire conversation got switched. And that's where the magic is, right? And this is something that I have seen very less number of coaches do in terms of their own self as an instrument of metaphors and awareness. It is something that is part of the markers. It's not something I'm inventing. It's part of the core competencies. And
Sunil, that's
yes,
it. I
Gayatri.
agree. Yeah, no, sorry. So yeah, when we did our first, I did it through ICA, and
Mm-hmm.
they had a 5-page list of sentences, and metaphor
Mm-hmm.
was one of them.
Mm.
You had to use metaphors because they were testing you on that. Of course, those were easier, gentler times. We didn't have to write exams and all, but it was very common. And I just wanted to share one common metaphor which I use a lot with my clients, which seems to resonate. Just like the bus, it's like Atlas holding the earth on the shoulder. So if you drop it, we're not going to die. So you don't have to become Atlas holding up the entire world on your shoulders.
Absolutely. It's so very interesting, Gayatri. If I don't know who the Atlas person is, I'm like, what? So there is that space of, I think also possibly, I think our language is so beautiful, right? That I would not have used Atlas to somebody I coach, because I coach in some of the vernacular languages there, and possibly somebody may not know Atlas. For Atlas, for a lot of people, is that book that has maps, and I may not have the thought process, or I may not even know that Atlas was the person who is depicted as holding the whole world on his head, kind of a thing. So that in a way is an expression of you're holding on to so many things that you can always let go of. But if I
Yeah.
don't know the Atlas,
So
I'm at a question mark.
I have to look at the reaction, right? Obviously, I'll use it depending on the person and how they understand.
Yeah.
But
So,
we have a lot of regional. So there's one in
mm,
South India. There's a temple where there is supposed to be a instrument which is never put down. So it's a pounding instrument, okay? And they say it's never put down. So
mm,
you can find other metaphors.
yeah. So that's the richness I'm talking about. That sometimes even while our sharing has to be done, that catering has to be sort of done in terms of the client on the other side, on everything, not necessarily only metaphors. Hmm. Somebody had raised your hand. Uh, Aniket, I think you had raised your hand.
Yeah, I had a point, can't remember now. Okay, yeah. I had two observations, Sunil. One was that when I picked the picture and I was describing it, while I was writing, so I think I must have written some four lines. While I was writing them, I did not realize that I had actually used metaphors, and there were four metaphors there. It was only when you asked us to look back and check if you've used any, is when I realized that indeed I have. And the second point was so you picked that image with the brain wired or irritated and annoyed, and you used metaphor to describe what had happened. In my case, I used metaphors and I picked the image that was my desired state. So that itself was, we use it in so many different ways, and I had never given it enough attention or importance, even in my daily life. But I realized I use a lot of metaphors. So these were two observations I wanted to share.
Yeah, I think my takeaway from the session, or take in from the session, is already done. Because that's the awareness that all of us use metaphors uh, in our daily life. That's how we communicate. That's how we express ourselves. Because a lot of this thing. So maybe if I am just saying the Atlas example, with just that Atlas, three or four words of the Atlas, I'm telling about so many things. That we are looking at carrying the entire burden of the world on our heads, and etc., etc., right? So with one word we are able to share so many things, and that's where the magic lies. And each of us, if all of us look at the same picture, all of us look at the same metaphor in terms of printed on the white sheet, if I'm printing it there, you would look at a very different story. And so also it brings that aspect, saying for me the Atlas, if I'm taking the Atlas, or say for example Royal Enfield, for example, like weirdest of weird. So I feel like a Royal Enfield on a wet road. Is that's what I'm saying as that space. So wet road is possibly a metaphor. Royal Enfield is something else. So look at that space. So for you it would describe something entirely different, and for me it would describe something entirely different. And it resonates to us both differently. And as coaches, I don't jump into say, hey, I think this is what it means. And that's something we should be aware of, um, conscious of, in our presence of as a coach. So we don't use their metaphors to color our canvas, and sometimes we don't let our interpretations of that metaphor become the client's representation without checking in with them. So that's something that's come from whatever you asked. Hmm. And now possibly if I switch back on those pictures and ask you to look at something else, as any picture, maybe you choose something entirely different. Your desired state has changed now, and your way of expression has changed. But it is a window into your world as a client, and the client it's a window into the client's world. It's a window into your world, and their metaphors could have triggered your chain of thoughts. So again, metaphors could be a space where presencing also becomes a part of it. Staying present also becomes a space in it, and offering that open space, non-judgmental aspects to it also becomes an interesting aspect in metaphors. But I am most happy if one of you has taken in that aspect that we are always looking at whenever we are conversing, even in our own heads, that there are metaphors at play. Play is a metaphor. Conversing is a metaphor. It may look like words, verbs, but there's something more to be shared as and when there is that is being shared. So metaphors will let us into your inner storytelling, and with possibly the most natural questions that come to you at that point of time as a coach. You can check with the client about those metaphors, ask them whatever is the most relevant question, possibly the most natural question at that point, to see where the conversation goes. So I think that's something that I wanted to sort of work with. I think we did cover the magic of it. We did cover the aspect of presence with metaphors. Also, not getting carried away with them. I think that's something that's very interesting. Not getting carried away with those metaphors. Because now, say, we've accepted, acknowledged that a lot of metaphors are there. There's a very high possibility that we are going on the wrong side of the Alice in Wonderland with the wrong portion. It is taking us somewhere, but was that the original aspect of the contract? The client agreed to that aspect of storytelling. I've had some very interesting sessions. Asked some no, very early on as like, oh, everything metaphors. I asked them, how you feeling? They said, I don't know. What would you like to achieve at the end of the call? I don't know. Blah blah blah. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But there's something, Sunil, that I don't know how to express myself as. And like similar to what Gayatri asked, my favorite question to ask is if you were to represent whatever you're sharing as a color, what would it look like? And it started with black and desired state. Next question was, okay, at the end of it, what would you like to be? It became black, sorry, black to white. And I said, what else is happening? And the client said, the white is suddenly turning red and it feels like it's a handkerchief and the kerchief staining blood. And and that point, I was like, oh shit, what am I doing? What is this metaphor taking me on? I don't know where this is going. Both of us are navigating the unknown, and that for me was a growing up moment in coaching to say not just jump into everything with metaphors and to also stay with the client at that point of time. Also gave me a confidence in that aspect of me as a coach, saying yeah, it can be a place where I can be myself. Maybe a little bit of that additional confidence comes from the aspect of me being a story writer also that with the observation to the story being told by the client, I know that something is interesting here. It's like I've caught on to this, I've sniffed what is happening here, although I may not have put what exactly this is, but I've sniffed something crazy is happening here, interesting is happening here. Hmm. I think that is equivalent to a lot of the things that I had thought I'll talk about. I did talk more about some of those things. And again, happy to connect with you on the WhatsApp. Been sharing WhatsApp everywhere else. If WhatsApp is not your poison, you can always connect me on LinkedIn. And with the same name that you see here, I'm available on LinkedIn and uh, always happy for a conversation. So, how did you feel across the session? What metaphors did you engage with? What metaphors did you fall in love with? And what metaphors fell in love with you? So, yeah, so I read your comment later. Yeah. So, Candida, you seem to have something almost at the tip of your tongue to share. I'm sensing that I could be wrong, but go ahead, take your moment in the sun and share.
Thank you. It was. Do you hear me? You hear
Yes,
me?
we hear
Yes.
you absolutely.
Okay. Very interesting session. Yeah, I like and I enjoy metaphors. And for what it concerns myself, I think that the image that I shared and I had in my mind was the sky and the clouds, the red sky and the sun with a direction. And so I think it meant a lot to me. And but as you said, Sunil, I think that as the audience said as well, one can, have an image, a different image, not from what I choose in that sense, no doubt. So I think that the use or using metaphors really can help people and the coachee and you can really give a direction or receive an idea from the coachee and really you can have a light, a lighter and an illumination, as we can say, of of a feeling. And so in this case, well, for me, it was really an happening for me. So thank you again for this session. Thank you so much for the contribution of all the audience as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, Candida, for being somebody who is interested in metaphors, you shared something I think I really loved in terms of receiving an idea, and that's a beautiful metaphor. And because I think maybe I was not also conscious of this, the aspect of we think in images, right? I think that's something that I think I skipped the introduction to that we think in images, and that's how also metaphors come into play into our lives. And maybe the language that I use, you use, can, even though the text is the same, the picture can be different, and that's where the big conversation is. Thanks for bringing it back to my notice. And with that, I also received an idea, and oh, fantastic! Thanks for sharing. Hmm. Yes. Deirdre, you had your hands raised.
It was a little bit of an accident, but I will share this. Well, thank you for the podium. I want to sort of shout out to everybody on this call who's speaking English, although it may not be your mother tongue. I really acknowledge that. That's quite a skill, and I'm a little jealous. I only speak little bits of different languages, but when you were speaking, even I was recalling, depending on the person's, background and where they're from, it's so important to know their cultural stuff, right? Had a client who I was saying something. I knew that she did yoga, and then we were talking a little bit. It was about her stall and her stagnant in her career and everything. And something I said, this is like Shavasana, you know? the very last pose, or I might say, depending on someone, this is like, I got to keep stirring the halwa, or it's going to burn. We just got to keep stirring the halwa, or it's going to burn. That's the, sort of the cultural context and everything. But to your point, Sunil, it's really beautiful that the metaphor, it does provide an image, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. So when I'll same thing. I'll introduce metaphors into mine just because I think we're kind of stuck, especially with analytical people. I think mostly.
Absolutely,
uh,
absolutely.
but I'll say, may I share what I'm thinking? Like the picture just came into my head, and they're like, yes, please. And I'll say, I'm getting this picture of your of this river. I just got a picture of a river. I don't know if it means anything, but it's like this river, and you're just this kind of boulder sitting in this river. Mean anything to you? And if they say, then I know we got something. And if they're like, no, like that, then I'll like, okay, yeah, just it's coming into my head, right? So just I thought it might be important to share here. But usually when I do that, I find, and I'll let it go. I mean, I'll let it drop. It's not about me being right, or I'm sorry, it's not about my being right. Now I feel like my English is being judged, but it's not about my being right. It's like what works, and sometimes it's the most obvious, the simplest, the most primary, the basic, the river, the garden, the planting. If people have any kind of gardening experience, you plant a seed and it doesn't come up the next day, right? So um sometimes people resonate, so sometimes it helps to know a little bit more about the background, the cultural. But the nice thing is that later when I talked to that client, and their thing was, I'm the boulder in the river. And I'm like, well, what do you want to do about that? Like, how's this going to go if you're the boulder in the river? And then they're like, I'm going to get worn down by the river. And I was like, uh-huh. And they're like, I got to be more playful with the river. I'm going to have to like, yeah, I'm gonna have to get other boulders so that we can control the river. Whatever it is, right? Like wherever it goes, I don't know where it's gonna go. So you got to be ready for the unknown, like you said, Sunil. You don't know where it's
Absolutely,
gonna go.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think because it's a beautiful space to be in, that unknown. I don't know what's happening. You don't know what's happening, and we're flowing in this together. And you also brought in that cultural aspects back into the equation. And another interesting thing, because what you said in terms of resonate uh, is typically how our NLP comes into play. Is if the metaphors are on a single train or a single theme, their audio. So if I'm saying I resonate, I listen, the voice, the sound, the tabla, whatever, somewhere there is a pattern around how I think as well. Am I auditory, this thing, and somehow then I suddenly switch to something else, and then there is a flip in our this thing. That's how also deeper listening can help you listen to the right metaphor. Mm. So that's something that, because you said resonate, it hit me saying, hey, you know what? I think there's a pattern to even our metaphors, because they're a language based thing. And based on our language is where everything else also gets into play. And here, the other interesting part is I asked you to look at a picture and then reflect. But then we don't do this as our default in a coaching session. Our default is only words, right? So it's a little different as to how it gets triggered in a session. You've asked something and something else comes, and I don't know if you looked at my session yesterday where I was the coach and I was the client. It's the same session right there, right there. It was an on the spot session. There were a lot of metaphors that were being shared, and my initial idea was to play that as a prelude for us to start discussing. But then last minute, I came to that saying, let's do this. Let's put a picture and see where it goes. And this is also an introduction as to how I use creativity in coaching. These enable the birthplace of metaphors with pictures and all the other things, and it leads us to wherever we are going. So hopefully by the next ICW 2026, I will have a CCU course on coaching and creativity. So that's something I'm manifesting. Fantastic. Thank you for your beautiful time. I know that you know I would have loved to keep time. That's something that I've been working on for quite some time. So this is space where I'd love to pause. Happy to take the conversation offline on a chat in LinkedIn, WhatsApp, wherever. And tomorrow there are two sessions where we will be talking about silence, and maybe we'll be being silent and not talking. So that's also part of that. And the last one is again coaching and creativity. I'm married in the same space. So, with a few experiences that I've had, a lot more of possibilities as such. So, we close at least my ICW in terms of session hosting tomorrow at 7. The same time we started today. Same Zoom link is the same. If you are with the Zoom link the same time tomorrow, that should do it. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Candida, Deidre, Abbas, Claudia, Jyoti, Neha, Mary, Dave, Anita, and all the others who have jumped onto the next ICW call as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Wonderful.
Bas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sunil.
Take care. Bye
Bye.
bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Bye bye. Bye to everyone.